phone. Don't need no speed, gotta get me home. Don't need no nothing, all I need is time for the simple life. Go get your butt off of
Hey everybody, it's your host here at Simple Life. This is Cynthia Fernandez. Simple Life is a radio program dedicated to the unheard voices on the Central Coast who are willing to speak about life experiences and perspectives close to heart. So you will be informed, perhaps, definitely entertained, and even perhaps touched by what you hear. Today's guest currently lives in Santa Cruz and is a student at UCSC. I think it's his junior year. I was interested in getting his perspectives on education and on his passions for his life, how he envisions his future, and also a little bit of perspective on the recent violence in Santa Cruz. His name is Peter Schelling, and due to schedules, his interview was recorded earlier this week. Let's listen. This is Simple Life, and I'm your host, Cynthia Fernandez. I'm here today with Peter Schelling, a UCSC student majoring in philosophy. Is that right, Peter?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, good. I'm glad you're checking me. So Simple Life is a show of unheard voices on the Central Coast, and we're really honored to have you here to represent a younger age group than we've had, except for my 9-year-old granddaughter, Isabella. But I'd love to find out more about your reason for choosing the major of philosophy. What really drew you to that subject matter?
Well, I've been interested in philosophy for quite a long time. Since I was pretty young, I've always been interested in, thinking outside the box, so to speak. I remember always asking questions in science class that teachers would have trouble with, or that they wouldn't want me to ask.
The hard questions?
Yeah, or just questions that seemed to be off topic. But what I found is when I started reading philosophy, it seemed to speak to me in a different way than science or some other, type of study.
So philosophy spoke to you in a different way. Did it sort of have an effect of creating order out of chaos? Whereas science is more nuts and bolts, more?
Well, I would say science also creates order out of chaos, certainly. But philosophy, for me, is more all-encompassing. It has less limitations because you can really, philosophize about anything.
Yeah, so how do you feel about education from a philosophical standpoint?
Well, let's see. From a philosophical standpoint, I guess I would say that, the education system has a lot of room for improvement. I think it's pretty hard to say exactly what would make it better. I think general education as a kid, if I'm remembering correctly, my elementary years, up through middle school, seemed to be pretty bad. And I don't think I really started really getting a serious education until I was probably in about probably till I started high school. And I was fortunate enough to go to a nice school, so I can't tell you about the experience of other students who went through high school. But
so which school was the nice school you went to?
I went to Stevenson School.
Yeah. So that's the Stevenson that's here locally.
Yeah.
Great. And that was high school.
Yes.
So prior to that, you were probably in public schools.
Yeah. I moved around schools quite a bit as a kid, but primarily I was in public school.
Mm-hmm. And you felt like you didn't get the kind of attention or maybe mentoring that would have been helppful?
Perhaps, yeah. I guess none of the things we studied really caught my interest. Not to say I don't think science is really fascinating or even some types of mathematics, but for me as a learner, it was always too rigid for me. I like to free flow a little bit more with my thinking.
Yeah, so we've had a few guests on the show talk about different aspects of education. And I think it was my second show. My guest was Caitlin Williams, who is a naturalist, a field educator. And she takes people out into nature, and she really works with them at their level, following their curiosity, their focuses, and their questions. Now, that's the original design for education from our ancestors. I mean, I don't know if you spend much time thinking about this, but our existing educational structure is only a couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
But people have been around a lot longer than that. And in the indigenous ways of educating, it's called invisible school. So the student doesn't know they're necessarily being taught or that they're learning anything. They're just experiencing things. Mm. And aptitudes can vary. I'm sure you would agree. You know, in a classroom, everyone's not at the same level at the same time. So having the freedom to really go at your own pace and have that curiosity fed is a way to maximize your intake of information and knowledge and experience.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, one thing that I think is important is, you know, not to say that a little structure and framework isn't good, but I think there is a certain point where freedom is really helpful in finding out what you're interested in. But once you get to that point, if you have no direction or structure to work within, it's really hard to, you know, give meaning to your studies. So science is a great example of something that has a extremely rigid framework, and even philosophy does. The boundaries are a little less clear, but you know, I guess I could have seen myself as a scientist had I found interest in it earlier on, but I guess I don't know, within the framework of the educational system, it never clicked with me. Mm-hmm.
We're in studio today with Peter Schelling, a student at UCSC, majoring in philosophy. So instead of going into the avenue of science, Peter, you're saying that you really didn't click with that in a big way, and you decided to go more in a philosophical direction. Would you say that the two have a relatedness for you?
Oh, completely. You know, there's a saying, I forget who quoted this, but it's that philosophy and science are continuous with each other. So that means as one makes progress, so does the other. So, you know, there can be philosophical advances that really help out in science and vice versa. And, you know, it's important to know that science was originally a form of philosophy, and they didn't really become distinct branches until later on when they're different methods of inquiry.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that you use philosophy or that sort of way of thinking and looking at things in your everyday life?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. In my everyday life, philosophy, you know, helps me critically analyze things. But there is a common perception that the philosopher is kind of locked away in their, you know, study and just pondering things. And I would say to some extent that's true. You know, and that's the question I get asked all the time. What are you going to do with philosophy?
Good question.
And I guess I would respond, of course there's teaching and, you know, just directly related to the field of philosophy. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's kind of what you make of it. You can apply it to a lot of different things. So I'm kind of just enjoying the learning process of it. I'm not too worried about specifically where it's going to take me. I'm fortunate enough to not have the direct necessity to know exactly what I'm doing right now.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
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 So aside from going to school, you love music.
Yes.
Yes. Do you write music?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And have you performed in public your music?
Yes, I have.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, what kind of music do you write and perform?
Well, I mean, I write a lot of different kinds of things. Right now I'm playing with a folk band, a little bit sort of rock folk. I love folk. I love, I'm actually classically trained, so that definitely has a heavy influence on what I write. I don't know. I couldn't really give you a distinct genre.
Got it.
Yeah.
But it's and as we're talking, I'm sort of noticing that there is an artistic aspect to you between the music and the philosophy. They're both very, what would you say, flowing, morphing kinds of interests.
Yes.
There's no hard lines like math. Math has some hard lines.
Math is very rigid, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's interesting. I wonder if those things will come to bear later, I mean, Bob Dylan, he was pretty philosophical.
Yeah, I mean, I love Bob Dylan, so...
There you go.
I mean, he definitely... Sometimes his lyrics are brilliant, and sometimes I have no idea what he's talking about, but...
Makes you think.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think. My favorite band, though, is, I have to say, Radiohead.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever heard any Radiohead.
I will look them up. I can't say I have.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Radiohead was at first listen, I could not stand them.
Really?
I did not like it. I had the CD and I put it away for a few months, and somehow it ended up in my car, and I was driving, listening to it, and it just clicked with me, and it became my favorite band from that moment on.
And what about it really got you? What do you think?
I think it has layers of complexity that take time to notice. So it's not a band that you can listen to and in your first listen really appreciate what's going on in a song. And I guess I would say their albums are sort of like full artworks, I view them as a whole. Not to say I don't listen to songs individually, but I'd recommend listening to an album all the way through.
Oh, nice.
A few times.
I will look them up.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, you strike me as a bright mind.
Well, thank you.
You've obviously experienced a fair amount in your time, and it sounds as though that you're being supported. You have a family that's really supporting and interested in your own best interests.
Yeah, definitely.
So from that vantage point, I would love to hear from you what you see as issues where we live. Monterey, Santa Cruz, the Central Coast. What do you see as looming issues that you might actually be faced with in your early adult life?
Well, I mean, I guess I could start with nature for one. I was walking through Pebble Beach the other day with my friend and just noticing how dead the forest is there.
I have noticed that.
And I'm originally from Truckee, California. So as a child, I learned a little bit about forestry. The forest in Pebble Beach is extremely overgrown, and there's a lot of brush buildup. It's extremely unhealthy. You see all the, pollutants from the golf course. And when you're driving through it, it just looks like this beautiful, pristine area. But when you actually get down into the forest, it's so sick and unhealthy. And I don't know if people really see that. But it's something that's been drawn to my attention, and I think could potentially be a huge problem. Maybe, I'm no expert, but 10 years or so, maybe less, or if not already.
Yeah, you have a good point, Peter. We're in studio today with Peter Schelling, a UCSC student majoring in philosophy, and we're speaking now about some issues that Peter will be facing in his young adult life, right here, right where we live. So the Pebble Beach area is a gated community.
Yes.
I think California in total might be in the lead around environmental issues.
Mm-hmm.
I do know we have a business in downtown Carmel, very close to the south gate of Pebble Beach, and a couple years ago there was a pretty big storm, and they lost 60 trees.
Wow.
In Pebble Beach alone. And I have noticed as well the health of the forest, even just around houses, around the golf courses, just like you said, just draws my eye. Like, you know, I'm not an arborist. I'm not claiming to be an arborist, but to my vision, it doesn't look like a vibrantly healthy tree.
Certainly not.
You know, and I think most of the value in the area of property has a lot to do with the beautiful landscape on the Central Coast. So I'm not sure if they know what to do about that.
I mean, it's definitely a tricky situation because you have all this infrastructure, all this money in the golf courses, you know, so people are invested in keeping it successful, and you know, potential solutions would probably go against all of those practices. So, you know, it's hard to find a good solution when there would, you know, obviously be a lot of conflict and it would become very political.
Very quickly.
That being said, I guess it just comes down to, you know, people deciding what's the most important thing, you know?
Yeah. So,
not that the most important thing always
well,
wins.
And it does come to values.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think in my age group, we grew up with an earth that seemed boundless. And now it doesn't seem so boundless. So there's been entire industries built on just harvesting, whether it's soil or minerals or water, just harvest without a plan or a vision that includes a regeneration.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you were in that position to decide what are the values in a community, what do you think you might choose, Peter?
Well, I mean, I think that's the biggest question for us today, not only concerning nature, concerning social values, you know, political values, all of these things. I see sort of coming to, I guess you could say, a kind of a tipping point. I wouldn't suggest what I think the best values are. I think that they need reevaluation. I could, you know, have maybe a little insight on as to what they are.
Yeah, let's get a little insight. Actually, hang on to that. We're going to go into a break now. Stay with us, and we'll find out Peter Schelling's insights. He is a bright mind from Santa Cruz. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back from that break. Peter, we're ready to hear some of those insights.
Well, I mean, I think the deterioration of nature is a huge problem. So for me, I value nature. I don't think human beings are too separate. We see ourselves as separate, but really, you know, we rely on nature
absolutely
completely. So if we're not valuing nature, I mean, almost above all else, at some point, that's going to come back and bite us. So I certainly think that is something that should be, you know, moved to the front of our concern, especially now, you know, concerning all the problems that we have with
environmental
pollution,
issues.
environmental issues.
So if nature is number one, that means that monetary profit is not number one. Would you agree? I mean, at least to me, it seems like everything that has to do with United States of America comes to an apex around money, profitability. That's why so many corporations have been shipped overseas. Yeah. That's why, you know, we have automated attendance when we call the bank. Everything just revolves around increasing profit. And you had said earlier that if we really do address, for example, just the forestry issues within Pebble Beach as a small example of that, a lot of people who have structured businesses and monetary interests might have a problem with that.
Yes.
So I think that's what you meant when you said, you know, we have to choose.
Yeah. I guess, but who makes that choice? That's the question, right? And it's not me.
It's not you, and it's
and
not
it's not really
me,
us.
and it is all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think so, but it's really tough to say. I mean, I couldn't say precisely where
to draw the line.
Where to draw the line? Yeah.
And I think that's one of the aspects of our world that is different than perhaps our parents or grandparents. Things are more complicated. We have more choices. We have more appliances. We have more toys. We have more entertainment. And so, yeah, you could say that's complicated, but isn't it always us that's choosing?
Well, I mean, we definitely have a choice in some regard. I see us, potentially becoming more isolated from our choices. I mean, I'm somebody who has differing views on things like social media, technology, things like that.
When you say differing ideas, give us an example.
Well, a lot of people see really great benefits in social media, technological advancement. And I would agree in a lot of cases. However, I think there are some problems, and they're connected with greater problems. At least in my experience, social media, is used as a tool to connect people. But at the same time, there seems to be a sense of isolation of the individual from, I guess if you want to be naturalistic, from the environment. But even in a social sense, it's not a physical, person-to-person interaction, which is not bad. But the problem is people don't necessarily need that anymore. And so people are far removed from, the outside world. Some people probably don't even go outside very often anymore.
I think that's true. I do think that's true. And I think that, social media is like food and water. It has a value, but unless you make healthy choices with quantity and frequency, it can really be destructive.
Exactly.
So it's not so much that technology is evil or that money is evil. It really has a lot to do with our choices and our awareness that we're even making choices, and our awareness on the value aspects of what the results will be, right?
I couldn't agree more. I think that's true with anything. I wouldn't say that anything is inherently good or bad.
Exactly.
It's sort of what we make of it. Especially, with technology, it can accomplish so much. I'm not anti-technology, of course. It saves people's lives. It does great things. But I guess it comes back to that question of value. What values are we going to hold foremost? And are we going to use technology to help us realize these goals, or, just kind of let it free float and not give it direction or purpose?
That's a really good point. If you're just joining us, we're here with Peter Schelling. He's a student at UCSC majoring in philosophy. Peter, I think that's a really good point. And, there's another element that sort of comes to mind. I'd love to get your take on this. There's an aspect of passive entertainment, whether it's, network media like Facebook or streaming movies. There's a number of passive entertainment options, and they're easy.
Very easy, yes.
And so the question in my mind is, does that have an element in this mix at all? If people continue to follow the easiest course, is it always the best course for their future?
I would say definitely not. The easy path never really got anyone anywhere, in my view. That being said, the technology today is pretty amazing, but it just is becoming more of a reliance.
People are relying on it more.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I don't watch TV. I can definitely get into hours of television sometimes. I wouldn't say I feel good afterwards. If I watch 3 or 4 hours of television in a day, I don't feel good. It doesn't make me happy. It just kind of takes me out of the moment, just passes time.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of how people describe opium. You know, it eases the pain. It makes things that bother you less bothersome, kind of numbs your feelings.
Yeah.
And your perspective.
Well, I mean, you can use anything in that way, you know? Anything can kind of take you out of the moment. But there are certain things that are definitely a lot easier. I mean, you can just click on your TV, record all your favorite shows, and be stuck at home for a few weeks.
That's true. You know, coming back to your comments about nature being so important, there's one thing that I've experienced with nature. You go outside, you go on a walk, you forgot your jacket, you forgot your water. Nature doesn't make it easy.
No.
There's some things called natural consequences that just, you know, they just are. There's no negotiating. There's no cheating. And you know, I think that's an element that is really key. But
I mean, you know, we're talking about power, right?
Yeah.
And money. Well, we don't really have the power. I don't know if we realize that. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, we all really know that we're not in control. You know, a giant meteor could come and just take us out in a second. So, I mean, there's certainly, you know, the true power lies in nature. And, you know, without water, without food, you're not doing anything.
That's right. And it's easy to forget when you go into a grocery store and the aisles are lined with food of all sorts.
Exactly.
International aisle, you got your frozen food aisle, you got your canned food aisle.
Yeah.
So it's easy to forget those natural consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that is the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is the bottom line, is that we're not completely in control like we think we are.
So we're in studio today with Peter Schilling, and he's a student at UCSC majoring in philosophy. Peter, I'd love to find out from you, you're a rock climber, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're rock climbing, do you feel a particular connection with nature that you don't otherwise?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, rock climbing is an experience unlike anything else I could describe to you. It's really, you know, only like itself. But, you know, there's just something about, you know, being pretty high off the ground, feeling the wind there. I went climbing up at Castle Rock a few weekends ago, and there was a point where I was above an eagle, or not an eagle, a hawk. And that was pretty unreal, you know?
Wow.
It was a pretty unreal experience.
Looking down on the
yeah.
birds.
And just, you know, to be a human being and have the capability to climb up a cliff, you know, that's not something all animals can do. It's it's an unreal experience. It's in nature, you know. You got to hike out there, bring all your gear, you know, have a partner that you trust. So there are a lot of elements there that really ground you, you know. Yeah,
and a lot of thinking ahead.
A lot of thinking ahead. And I'm not an experienced climber by any means, but I have a friend who is very experienced. He's done a lot of climbs in Yosemite, Pinnacles, all those big places.
Yeah.
So I feel really safe having him out there.
So I would imagine, although I haven't done rock climbing, there's a humbling aspect to it.
Yeah, I mean, gravity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're falling, you're gonna fall. So you want to make sure that you have everything, you know, figured out.
Right. And you don't make any assumptions, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, from what my buddy who's experienced tells me, it's about minimizing the risk, you know, stacking the odds in your favor, as he would say.
Right.
So that's what you try and do. You got a lot of equipment, because things can really go wrong. And it's actually very safe, so long as you take the precautions, you know, don't do any crazy climbs outside of your ability. So that, you know, there's a very safe element to it. It's just more of a mental thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it also sounds like rock climbing is a philosophy that would be useful in life.
I mean, yeah, you could definitely apply certain principles of rock climbing to life. Totally.
Go for it. What would you apply?
Wow. On the spot. You know, stacking the odds in your favor.
There you go.
That's a good one. I'm sure you were thinking the same. You know, being surrounded by people that you trust. That's
true.
Very important. And then, you know, there's the metaphor of being grounded in nature, too.
And don't take something on beyond your means.
Exactly.
Yeah, we could have used that for the last few years before the housing bubble burst.
Yeah.
Right? If you're just joining us, we're here with Peter Schelling. He's a student at UCSC, majoring in philosophy. We live in a fairly safe community, Central Coast. And yet we have a fair amount of violence. I know that there's violence everywhere, and sometimes the politics or the demographics get in the way of what actually gets recorded or reported. Yeah. But you live in Santa Cruz, and a student at UCSC. What's your perspective about violence in our area?
Well, I mean, violence is, a pretty sensitive issue, especially to those who are involved. There are the recent police shootings. A student was shot on campus. And, that's a really big deal in Santa Cruz because those things don't happen as often. Actually, some of my good friends were robbed at gunpoint their freshman year. Really? Right in Santa Cruz? In Santa Cruz, right on the basic campus.
Oh, my gosh.
So they're pretty good friends of mine, and it was a pretty traumatic experience for them. I don't know if I really have a take on it. Violence always happens, and it's unfortunate when it does.
And what do you suppose motivates a violent act?
I suppose maybe some kind of anger or impulse at times, maybe some kind of helplessness, robbery. But I couldn't really say if there's any general tendency among violent acts.
And yet, a violent act, if it is impulse-driven, as you mentioned, it would be something that would fall into that camp of being an easy, quick fix, immediate gratification.
Maybe in some cases, yeah, totally could. I think you could say that. Right,
and just sort of a side thought. What would it be like if criminals, robbers, as an example, were taken out and taught rock climbing?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know if it would have a direct impact on anything like that, but it could be useful. You seem to be suggesting maybe there is room for reevaluation in our justice system. I don't know if you'd go so far as to say something like that.
I personally am of the mind that, everything's up for review.
Yeah, me too.
People who live a long life continue to review their life. And if you think about how we come into the world not knowing how to walk, there's a lot of reevaluating that goes on to accomplish being able to walk.
Yes.
And that's just a necessary part of our existence.
Yeah, well, I actually would have a question for you.
Sure.
What to you is the connection between, say, robbing a store and serving time in prison?
Well, that's a great question, and actually, it was something I wrote about in high school for my thesis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you pegged it. The way I see it is that we are protecting the innocent. So if someone has proven themselves as having, let's say, bad judgment,
okay,
to the point where they no longer have the ability to control their impulses, and they no longer have the ability to empathize about how their actions affect other people, that it's a disability. And the first response is to protect people from them. I don't have any reason to believe that our justice system and our prison system is focused on rehabilitation.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So it seems that the value then of the justice system is placed on protecting the innocent, in your view? Something along those
that's
lines?
Giving it a lot of benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
Now, the other side of the coin is, we had said earlier, Peter, business in America is profit-driven.
Yes.
At least there's evidence that looks that way, right? There's also evidence, measurable evidence. I just saw this the other night on the internet, speaking of technology, that the United States of America has 20 million prisoners.
Wow.
And both China and India are fractions of that.
Wow.
And they're geographically larger.
Yeah.
Russia was in there, and it was a fraction of those. So there's also information on the internet that suggests that our prison system is the single fastest growing industry in America.
Wow. Well, Those statistics are really fascinating, and I didn't know that. I knew that our prisons were overflowing, but
literally we can't build them fast enough. I had a guest on Simple Life 2 weeks ago who is a lawyer locally, Mahmoud Abu Zaid, and he suggested in the interview, he actually shared with me that the legal system is overloaded to the point where between the budget cuts that required judges to now perform functions that used to be handled by clerks,
wow,
and just every aspect of the legal system is so overloaded that it would take a year to get to trial.
Wow.
Prisons are also overfilled, and they can't handle the load. They can't hire people fast enough to work there. They can't build them fast enough. So, I think that would indicate there needs to be a review, but certainly not just of that one aspect.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's a possibility that, Americans just have a lot more criminals, but it doesn't seem that would be the case.
How so?
Well, I mean, I don't want to suggest that the prison industry wants people to go into jail. I don't want to suggest that. But it just seems to be very striking that China has just a fraction of the amount of prisoners compared to the United States.
Yeah, that is an interesting. I'm sure there's a lot.
People are people, right? In my view.
Yeah.
Unless our society, is just a place that breeds people who like to break the law. I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting question. We're in the studio today with Peter Schelling, a UCSC student majoring in philosophy. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The question that you posed, people are people, reminds me of your earlier comment about school and how one of the aspects of school that isn't really your favorite aspect is the rigidity.
Yeah.
The rules and the protocol and the administration and the aspects that you're required to comply with that don't really fit your nature.
Yeah.
I wonder if that somehow plays into the mix.
It definitely could, I've always been somebody who kind of goes against the system. I don't know what it is about myself that just kind of likes to have that freedom and, I guess break rules.
You sound wild to me.
I mean, maybe a little bit in some ways.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
That's how we came in.
Yeah.
I mean, look at nature.
Yeah.
You don't see trees out in the forest growing in a straight line.
No. Yeah, I mean it's an interest. It's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always used nature as a way to learn about what's true.
Yeah.
Nature doesn't lie.
Yeah, well, I mean it can't lie.
So that's a really good point. Several times in the conversation, Peter, we've talked about just a couple of important aspects of life on the Central Coast, the environment and the legal system, violence as an aspect of that. And it's been stated that, well, we should rethink that and we should review that. Kind of reminds me of the presidential debates where people talk about important things, but nothing really happens. Mm. So one question that one might have is, well, then what difference does it make? There's sort of a futility in that over a chronic period of time. Talking about it, reviewing it, Nothing ever changes. It's not my decision. I can't control it.
Yeah, I mean, a skeptic might think that way. I can definitely get caught in those lines sometimes. However, I think, if you really go deep and reevaluate things, it does make change.
So, not that long ago, there was a political address that President Obama made, and he started it out the way our Constitution was written. It started out, "We the people." And the responses that I heard from people who heard that address were reminded and touched at how the focus really is we the people, that we all do count, and that we are the control of our country. It's every single person on the planet, but specifically within our country, it's every single person within our nation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easy to forget that as an individual within your nation, you count. How you spend your money makes a difference. It's a vote. Who you spend your money with, whether it's a local business or an international conglomerate or a franchise or a farmer at farmer's market.
Yep.
I mean, it makes a difference. Your spending habits make a difference. And how you take care of your health makes a difference in how well you can think with a clear head.
Yeah.
Sitting in front of the TV for 4 hours compared to take a hike, right?
Mm-hmm.
All those little choices make a difference. Carbon footprint. What kind of car do you drive? How often do you drive? Do you map out all your little errands in one fell swoop, or do you, kind of lose track of that?
Mm-hmm.
Everything makes a difference. And then quantum physicists would suggest that even the fact that we think that way energetically makes a difference.
They would suggest that.
They
yeah.
would suggest that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. Why not? Why not take on the things that we can actually control instead of focusing sort of consistently and incessantly on the things that are out of our control?
Yeah. Well, those things aren't always easy to determine sometimes. But I think that's the idea, yeah. You could say that society has this pressure upon the individual, They kind of say, it's up to you guys. And then the individual might say, oh no, but we're just, functioning within the laws. So where's the accountability,
Good question.
Is it on us, or is it on the infrastructure and the framework that we're within? I might say that the two are actually inseparable. So the accountability lies on both, but it's easy to blame the other, It's easy for society to look at its individuals and criminalize them, and it's easy for the individual to place blame on the infrastructure.
And there's that comment about taking the easy road.
Yes. It's certainly a lot easier to blame someone else, isn't it?
Yeah, than to look at yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, accountability. Now, that certainly is an aspect that nature has a hold on us with, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Directly.
So, if you forget your coat, you forget your water, you forget where to put your foot when you're rock climbing.
Yeah, whose fault is that, right?
It's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
So, the other thing I know that you have as a hobby is reading.
Yeah.
Tell me your of all time, your favorite book. What would that be?
Wow. That might take some time to think about. I can say right now what's interesting me most is Nietzsche.
Ah.
Yes. And it's kind of funny because a lot of what we've been talking about is right up his alley.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite writers.
Yeah, me too.
I love his perspective on things.
Yes.
It's an uncommon perspective. It's very simple, but it also, I don't know, it strikes me as more of an artistic perspective because it takes in a broader swatch of how things are connected than normal.
Yeah, I really respect that about his ideas. The funny thing about reading Nietzsche, though, is, I'll go from paragraph to paragraph and I'll be, really excited and feel inspired. And then the next paragraph, I'll just be super angry and upset. And that's kind of, I think that's what his intention is, to sort of get you going. Yeah. Which, I mean, it's tough to, if you really read it, and put yourself in, follow his logic. It's an emotional roller coaster. For sure. Yeah. And, he's probably traveling that same roller coaster himself. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think he was content by any means. So, when you were growing up, did you do a lot of reading? Were you read to as a small child? I was read to.
So, Peter, my next question for you, what dreams or goals do you have for your future?
Well, I would like to, do something that's of service to the community. I have a particular interest in soccer. I've done quite a bit of coaching. I play, and I think that that's a good area to, develop teamwork, learn, life lessons,
Get grounded.
And I mean, my primary reason is I love the game.
You've played a lot of soccer.
Yeah, a lot of soccer.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Since how long? How young were you?
Four. Still playing
4.
today. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So you might go pro.
I mean, that's my dream. I'm gonna give it a shot. But...
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, it's really a pleasure to meet a young person with a bright mind and grounded footing.
Oh, thank you.
And artistic all around. I have high hopes for your adult contribution to our community. I'm
Thank you.
really pleased to meet you. It's great to have you.
Thanks.
It was such a pleasurable conversation. Unfortunately, a lot of the conversation that Peter and I shared that day, we didn't have time for. But I really look forward to my next interview, and I encourage all of you to take a listen to each other, no matter where you are. If you're on the bus or in the grocery store, you happen to encounter someone that you don't know very well, ask a question, see what they say, and listen. It's such a great experience. Thank you so much for joining us here at Simple Life Radio. The Stories for the Adventurous at Heart will be here next Saturday. And until then, stop in and see us at Pilgrim's Way. Paul and I will be there, and sometimes Bella. We're downtown in Carmel on Dolores between 5th and 6th in beautiful Carmel by the sea. Give us a call, 831-624-4955. And we've got that Facebook page. Paul knows where it's at now. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Zabba-dab, zabba-dab, zabba-dab,